I'm just chilling at my go-to coffee shop, minding my own business, when all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. When Karen calls the cops on a homeless kid, claiming he's a scammer, I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Here's how it all went down. I am a regular customer of this coffee shop, as in our neighborhood. It is more than a coffee shop. It was the hub of all things, from lazy morning chatters to late-night intellectual debates. The mismatched chairs, abstract art, and the ever-present scent of roasted beans made it a favorite spot for many. I often found myself tucked in a cozy corner, a perfect place to people-watch and soak in the atmosphere. Today was no different. With a latte in one hand and a book in the other, I was engrossed in my own little world. However, my focus shifted when a kid, perhaps around 12 years old, took a seat just outside the window. He set up a makeshift cardboard sign that read, $1 bracelets. His eyes, though young, held stories of hardship, and his tattered clothes confirmed my suspicions. He was homeless. I was just about to approach the kid, perhaps offer to buy him a meal, when Karen, the neighborhood's self-appointed vigilante, made her entrance. Flanked by her signature pixie cut, she immediately zeroed in on the kid. "Why is that child allowed to sit there? This is a respectable place," she began her tirade, aiming her complaints at anyone within earshot. Ignoring Karen was everyone's usual strategy, but she wasn't one to be overlooked. Determinedly, she strode outside, leveling the kid with a glare that would have made anyone quiver. She pointed a manicured finger at his sign. "You think you can just sit here and lie to decent folks?" Karen snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. The kid, visibly shaken, replied, "I'm not lying, ma'am. I'm just trying to get by." Karen leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "I've heard about you kids, part of a syndicate, right? Pretending to be homeless and scamming good people out of their hard-earned money. It's a pathetic little racket." The kid's eyes widened in disbelief. "Syndicate? I don't even know what that word means. I'm here alone, just trying to eat," she smirked, pulling out her phone with a triumphant glint in her eye. "We'll see about that. The police will sort you out." Undeterred, Karen took out her phone and dialed 911. "Hello? I'd like to report a scam artist. Yes, a very dangerous one," she exaggerated, throwing the kid dirty glances. I couldn't sit back anymore. Standing up, I walked over. "Excuse me, ma'am. Why don't you and I chat for a minute?" I interjected, trying to de-escalate. While the kid looked on, confused and frightened, I led Karen away, talking to her in hushed tones. However, just as things seemed to settle, sirens wailed in the distance. An actual police car pulled up. Karen looked triumphant. Officer stepped out, recognizing the kid immediately. "Hey there, everything okay?" The kid nodded. "Just trying to get by, officer." Turns out, the police officer was familiar with the kid's situation. His family had recently lost their home, and he was trying to help in any way he could. Karen, not missing a beat, interrupted. "So you know this scammer? He's probably tricked you too." Officer frowned, looking at Karen. "Ma'am, I can assure you this kid isn't involved in any scams. He's genuinely going through a tough time." Karen folded her arms, still defiant. "Well, I still think he's up to no good." Determined to prove her point, Karen suddenly pulled out a $10 bill and theatrically waved it in front of the homeless kid. "Here! If you're so honest, let's see what you do with this." Everyone watched in bewilderment as she placed the bill on the ground, half expecting the kid to jump or make a scene. The kid, however, simply looked at the bill, then back at her, confusion evident on his face. "Thank you, ma'am," he said calmly, "but I'd rather earn it." Despite Karen's wild antics, folks around started looking at the homeless kid in a new light. Some from the nearby tables came out with sandwiches and drinks for him. A young woman from the bookstore across the street brought over a pile of comic books. "Figured you might enjoy these," she said with a smile. A guy from the table next to mine, who I recognized as the local mechanic, chatted with the kid and mentioned something about offering his parents some work at the garage. "We could use some extra hands," he said, patting the kid on the back. But Karen, still determined to prove her point, had one more trick up her sleeve. She hurried back from her car with a small, yapping dog trying to put on a show. "Look, everyone! Look!" she shouted, letting the dog sniff the $10 bill she had previously offered the homeless kid. "If he's a scammer, my specially trained scam-sniffing dog will bark." The little dog, however, seemed more interested in a nearby sandwich than in the kid or the bill. After a few awkward moments of silence, the dog happily trotted over to the homeless kid and wagged its tail, hoping for a bite of his sandwich. Karen, red-faced and out of ideas, muttered something under her breath and stormed off, her high heels clicking angrily against the pavement, her scam-sniffing dog trailing behind her with a piece of sandwich in its mouth. The kid, trying to stifle a chuckle, turned to those around him. "Thanks, everyone. Really, it means a lot." The day wrapped up with folks going back to their coffees and conversations, but there was a warmer, kinder atmosphere in the air. The kid's spot outside the window became a sort of mini-commune, with people stopping by, chatting, and showing that sometimes a community's strength shows up in the most unexpected ways. Wow, what an incredible story. It's heartwarming to see how a community came together to support this young kid in need. Karen really got shown that her assumptions were way off base. Kudos to the people who offered him food, comic books, and even job opportunities. This is the kind of positivity we need more of in the world. I never expected my summer camp job to turn into a dangerous game of defiance. But when an entitled kid aimed a rifle at another camper, things took a perilous turn. Little did I know, facing off against his police officer dad would be the ultimate test of my resolve. Here's how it all went down. Summers during my youth weren't just about lazing around. They were about learning, growing, and making memories. I found myself working at a summer camp, not for the money, but because I was genuinely passionate about it. You see, I wasn't just any camp instructor. I was responsible for teaching kids one very specific and potentially dangerous activity. Every year was the same. A fresh batch of enthusiastic kids would roll in, their eyes shining with excitement. Most were eager learners, hanging on to every word I said. They came in as novices, but left with a new skill and heaps of memories. However, teaching wasn't always a breeze. Just like in school, where there's always that one kid who just won't settle down. At camp, too, there was always that one camper who felt the rules didn't apply to them. I called them my challenging ones. Still, the magic of the camp always brought me back. Watching those kids grow, learn, and overcome challenges was a joy in itself. But, as with all stories, there's always that one incident you can never forget. This is mine. The first day always had a unique energy to it. Fresh faces, anticipation in the air, and that undeniable feeling of adventure waiting to happen. After the morning introductions and a brief tour of the campsite, I'd gather the kids at the range, the sun warming our backs. "All right, gather around, everyone!" I'd call out, ensuring I had their undivided attention. I would point towards the range. "This place, it's not a playground, and these," holding up a rifle, "are not toys. I cannot and I will not stress enough about the importance of safety here." I noticed entitled Scout at the back, nudging his friend and whispering something, a smirk on his face. Ignoring him, I continued. "There are posters all around you," gesturing to the bold prints plastered everywhere, detailing every single rule. So if anyone here thinks they can feign ignorance, think again. As days turned into weeks, most kids settled into the camp's rhythm, respecting the rules and understanding their importance. But not entitled Scout. Whether it was not wearing safety gear or neglecting to check his equipment, he was becoming a daily challenge. His mischiefs ranged from harmless pranks to outright risky behaviors. One day, while we were on the range, I noticed him fiddling with his rifle, distracting others. "Entitled Scout," I bellowed, "is there something you'd like to share with the group?" He replied, rolling his eyes. "Just trying to have some fun, man. Loosen up. Fun has its time and place. Here, it's safety first," I responded, trying to maintain an even tone. But as the days rolled on, it became clear that entitled Scout was not just challenging the rules, but actively defying them. And I knew sooner or later, things would come to a head. It was early morning, and you could hear the chatter of the kids mixed with the sounds of the wilderness, and suddenly interrupted by a sharp gasp. I turned around just in time to see entitled Scout, rifle aimed at another scout, channeling his best action hero impersonation. "You feeling lucky, punk?" Time seemed to slow as my heart raced. I bolted over, grabbing the rifle from entitled Scout's hands. "What the heck do you think you're doing?" He shrugged, feigning innocence. "Relax, man. The gun wasn't even loaded." "Loaded or not," I countered, my voice rising with every word. "That's not how we treat firearms, or our friends." Pulling out his shooting ticket, I made a show of tearing it in two, ensuring every camper saw. "You're done on this range for the week," I said sternly. That should have been the end of it. But the universe had other plans. Later that afternoon, while tidying up, I saw a silhouette making its way towards me. It was entitled Scout, and he wasn't alone. Behind him, like a shadow, was a man easily twice my size, muscles bulging through his shirt. That had to be Cop Dad. I took a deep breath, preparing for what was about to unfold. Before they even reached me, entitled Scout's voice rang out, "That's him, Dad. He's the one who ruined my week." Cop Dad's eyes locked onto mine, filled with fire and fury. I steadied myself, knowing that the storm was about to hit, but I also knew I had acted right. Now, it was time to face the music. Cop Dad's chest heaved with each breath, his nostrils flaring. "How dare you tear up my son's ticket?" he bellowed, spittle flying. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do to you?" His voice echoed around the camp, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Entitled Scout, standing confidently behind his father, wore a smug smirk, sure that his father's outrage would crush me. I held up a hand, trying to defuse the situation. "Sir, let me explain," I began, but he cut me off. "I don't need your explanations. I want action. You better fix this right now or else." His finger jabbed menacingly in my direction. Gathering all the courage I could muster, I replied, "Your son pointed a gun at another camper. It doesn't matter if it was loaded or not. Safety is our top priority here. You expect me to believe you over my own son? Cop Dad's face was crimson, his fingers clenched into fists. Just when I thought things might take a violent turn, a group of campers, led by the very scout entitled Scout had aimed his rifle at, stepped forward. It's true, sir, the scout said. He pointed his gun at me, just for fun. One by one, other campers chimed in, backing up the story. Cop Dad, visibly caught off guard, turned to entitled Scout. Is this true? For a moment, the whole range went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Cop Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red, eyes bulging as he processed what I just said. But then, slowly, his gaze shifted from me to ES. The smirk on entitled Scout's face evaporated as he realized the impending storm. Taking a step closer to his son, Cop Dad growled, "Did you think this would be funny? Pointing a gun at someone?" Entitled Scout stammered, trying to find words and failing. The tables had turned. I'm sorry, sir, Cop Dad said, rubbing the back of his neck, his anger now replaced with embarrassment. Looks like we've got some things to discuss, son, he said, shooting ES a stern glance. In the days that followed, Cop Dad would come to the range, a bit humbler, and we'd exchange glances. We never became friends, but there was a silent understanding. He respected the job I had to do, and I respected him for finally seeing the truth. Entitled Scout? Well, let's just say his antics around the camp noticeably decreased. As the final day of camp dawned, I packed up, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had transpired. I was finishing up when Cop Dad approached, his demeanor much calmer than our last intense encounter. "I want you to know," he began, his voice deep yet sincere. "When we get home, he's going to get a lesson about responsibility and respect. He needs to understand the gravity of what he did." I nodded, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you, it means a lot." That summer had been a roller coaster, but it left an indelible mark on my heart. While I encountered many challenges, it also reinforced invaluable lessons. Life at camp wasn't just about teaching kids. It was also about growing as an individual. That summer, I learned that patience was more than just waiting. It was understanding. The truth was not just about being right, it was about standing by it, even when it was difficult. And respect, it was a bridge that could be built even after a storm of misunderstandings. Always stand by what is right. Never let power trappings get over you. Kudos to the main character for showing integrity and staying true to their principles even in the face of adversity. It's inspiring to see someone navigate challenging situations with grace and make a positive impact on those around them. I never thought my parents would want to start a family after all these years of neglect. But when they dropped the bombshell that they were expecting, everything changed. The road to rebuilding trust and finding our place in each other's lives was filled with unexpected twists and turns. Here's how it all went down. Growing up in a house with my grandparents, with my biological parents around in roles that felt less parental and more distant, was confusing. I remembered a day in 3rd grade, having a craft activity where we had to make family trees. Most of my friends had straightforward trees. Mine, however, had more branches and explanations than a normal kid's. My teacher even raised an eyebrow, but I just muttered, "It's complicated." I was born when my mom and dad were just teens. Mom was 16, and dad was a year older. I often overheard hushed conversations between my grandparents about how my parents were just too young to handle the responsibility. So, they decided to raise me, allowing my parents to grow up themselves. There were times I'd join my friends at the park, and they'd have their parents cheering for them or pushing them on swings. My grandparents did their best, but there was an age gap that couldn't be ignored. Sometimes I'd imagine Mom rushing over to tie my shoelaces or Dad giving me a high five after a good kickball match. But those were just fantasies. My mom, living with us until I turned 7, often felt more like an older sister. She was into the latest trends, always on her phone or out with friends. When I got an award at school, her reaction was always subdued. "Cool, kiddo," she'd say without looking up. The lack of interest stung, but I tried to hide it. I remember one time when I excitedly showed her my artwork. She glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, I guess." I couldn't help but feel disappointed. "Mom, I worked really hard on this. Can't you show a little more enthusiasm?" I asked, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. She sighed, putting her phone down for a moment. "Look, kiddo, I'm just busy with work and stuff. It's not that I don't care, it's just I have a lot on my plate right now," she explained, her tone slightly defensive. Dad was a different story. He moved out when I was barely 2, but every holiday or special occasion, he'd make an effort to spend time with me. "Hey, champ, how's school?" he'd ask, ruffling my hair. His efforts felt genuine, but with the years and distance, our bond wasn't as strong as I wished. I remember my 10th birthday. I waited all day, hoping for a surprise visit from Mom or maybe a call from Dad. Evening came, and there was just a text from Dad and a small gift from Mom that looked like a last-minute purchase. That night, my grandmother held me close, trying to console my young heart. By the time I entered high school, I had come to terms with the unique family situation. I focused on my studies, sports, and the few close friends I had. But a big twist was on the horizon. Out of the blue, my parents began seeing each other. They were secretive at first, but then it became more obvious. And just as I was grappling with this, they dropped the news that they wanted to be a family. A real family, with me moving in with them. My first reaction was disbelief, then anger. All these years, I had yearned for their attention, and now, when they found it convenient, they wanted to play house? Imagine my shock when I came home one day to find baby stuff scattered everywhere. Tiny shoes, baby clothes, and even those cutesy baby towels. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. "What's all this?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Surprise!" Mom said with a hesitant smile, her hand caressing her not-so-obvious baby bump. "Wait, what? You're pregnant?" I was incredulous. I mean, I'd always wished for a sibling, but now? The timing felt like a cruel joke. That night, they sat me down and laid out all their plans. Talks of moving to a bigger house, enrolling the baby in the best schools, and most bizarrely, family trips every weekend. The thought of being dragged into this new happy family facade was nauseating. In the days that followed, their newfound enthusiasm for family felt suffocating. It was all a bit much. Every conversation revolved around the baby and how we, as a family, would navigate this new chapter. Their sudden commitment felt forced, like they were trying to make up for lost time, but at my expense. One evening, amidst dinner prep and discussions about baby room colors, I snapped. "You know what? Screw this. You two went about your lives almost forgetting I existed, and now you're playing happy families?" I was screaming now, my voice echoing through the house. Mom, usually so stoic and distant, looked wounded. "You think we didn't care?" she shot back, her voice trembling. I scoffed. "Actions speak louder than words." She took a shaky breath, her walls crumbling. "I know we messed up, I do, but we were so young, trying to figure things out. I'm not asking you to forget, just try to understand." Dad, his face etched with concern, added, "We love you, always have, and we're sorry we let you down, but please, give us a chance to make it right." There it was, raw and exposed, their plea for a fresh start. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but it was clear that change, whether I liked it or not, was on the horizon. I ran out, overwhelmed. My grandparents consoled me. Their words were always gentle, reminding me that people change and grow up. They acknowledged my parents' mistakes, but also pointed out their efforts now. I took a week off from everything to think. One day after school, I found myself outside Dad's apartment. I decided to hear him out. We sat, talking for hours. He explained his side, the pressure of being a young father, the choices he made thinking they were for the best, and his regrets. The discussion was painful, but needed. It laid the foundation for a possible future. But the road was long, filled with hurdles, and the biggest one was rebuilding trust. Weeks turned into months. I started spending more time at my parents' place, getting used to the idea of them as a couple, as my primary caregivers. It felt weird to suddenly have them enforcing rules and expecting me to share details of my daily life. The shift from almost being peers to parent-child was jarring. However, they were making efforts. They attended counseling to better understand how to bridge the gap between us. I also attended a few sessions, letting out the pent-up feelings of neglect and abandonment. Our therapist was understanding, guiding us on how to communicate better and move forward. But the real turning point was the birth of my sister Lucy. Holding that tiny life in my hands, I realized the monumental task my parents faced when I was born. Suddenly, their choices, however flawed, made more sense. Lucy became the glue that held our family together. My parents, having matured over the years, doted on her, but they also made sure I never felt left out. We started forming little family traditions, Saturday movie nights, monthly road trips, and festive dinners. Slowly, the house echoed with laughter and warmth, something I had only dreamt of before. Dad often talked to me about his mistakes. He'd say, "I can't change the past, but I promise to make the future brighter for both of you." Mom, on the other hand, tried to reconnect in little ways, cooking my favorite dishes, helping with school projects, or just talking late into the night. Despite the growing bond, there were days when old resentments crept in. Times when I'd overhear Mom on a call with a friend, discussing her lost youth, or when Dad's promises would be forgotten due to his busy schedule. It was a reminder that while we were rebuilding, the cracks of the past were still present. One day I confronted Mom about her conversation. "Mom, I overheard you talking about your lost youth. Does that mean you regret having us?" I asked, my voice filled with insecurity. She sighed, sitting down next to me. "No, sweetie, it's not like that. I don't regret having you. It's just that sometimes I think about the dreams and opportunities I had to put aside when I became a young mother. It's natural to wonder, what if? But please know that you and your sister are the most precious things in my life," she explained, her eyes filled with sincerity. I nodded, trying to understand. And Dad, sometimes I feel like you forget your promises because you're too busy. Does that mean you don't care? I asked, looking for reassurance. Dad pulled me into a hug. Oh, sweetheart, I care more than words can express. I know I've made mistakes in the past, but I'm working hard every day to make it right. Sometimes life gets overwhelming, and I may slip up, but please know that I love you and your sister with all my heart, he assured me, his voice filled with love and determination. However, the most significant change came from within me. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment was only poisoning my present. I had to learn to forgive, not just for them, but for myself. I began attending therapy alone, working through my feelings and understanding the importance of letting go. High school graduation was a bittersweet event. My grandparents sat proudly in the audience, their eyes brimming with tears. Next to them were my parents holding Lucy, who was now a chirpy toddler. As I stepped onto the stage, the weight of my journey weighed heavily on me. I realized I had not one but two families cheering me on. As the years passed, our family found its rhythm. There were ups and downs, but the commitment to stick together, to heal, and to grow became our driving force. I headed to college, making sure to visit often, especially for Lucy. She grew up in a household filled with love and support, a stark contrast to my early years. But she always knew the story, the sacrifices, and the journey we underwent to become a family. At the heart of it all were two important lessons. First, the importance of forgiveness. It's not about forgetting, but about freeing oneself from the chains of bitterness. Second, the idea that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the bonds we forge, the efforts we make, and the love we share. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.